Good afternoon. My name is Terry McVenis, the President and CEO of RTCA. Thank you all for tuning in and being a part of today's webinar. For this month's Tech Talk, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Robert Pearce, the Associate Administrator for NASA's Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate. Bob manages a large portfolio of NASA's aeronautics research, including such things as research in quiet supersonic flight over land, urban air mobility, autonomy, highly efficient advanced air vehicle concepts, electric aircraft propulsion, advanced materials, airspace operations and safety, and the integration and flight demonstrations of aviation systems. A longtime supporter of RTCA's efforts and a member of RTCA's advisory committee, I'm pleased to turn things over to you, Bob. Bob, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Terry. It's a real pleasure to be here this afternoon. And what I plan on doing is giving you a quick perspective on how NASA views the future of aviation and some of the work we're doing to enable just that future. So I want to start with a perspective of what that future looks like, and then I'll go talk to each of these pieces in just a little bit of detail. But I'm going to go pretty quick just to give you that high-level perspective. So the bottom line for us is we see four transformations, those four pictures that you see there, as it's kind of the baseline for what we see as the future of aviation. And they all add up to three things. One is sustainability. The future of the system needs to be environmentally sustainable. And so the system as it is today needs to transform into one that reduces emissions, reduces noise, and enables aviation to continue to grow both nationally and globally. We certainly want to increase mobility for the traveling public, as well as to enable new forms of mobility, both more local and regional, more ability to move packages and other things, both obviously long distance as it is today, but also for short distance type deliveries and and things like that. And then certainly economic growth as we look forward. We certainly want to make sure that the aviation system continues to support the economic growth of the nation and the world. So you see those four pictures just really briefly in the upper left-hand corner. The backbone of aviation, as you all know, is the airline system that relies on subsonic transports to move large numbers of people and goods. What we see there is a transition to more ultra-efficient type vehicles. What you see there is a transonic truss brace wing that has a aspect ratio, or the length of the wing could be as much as twice as what you see today, and that just brings much less drag for the equivalent amount of lift, and so we can move more efficiently through the air. The engines are going to be much more highly efficient. They'll probably be hybrid electric engines, bringing a megawatt more of power to the propulsion system, electric power to the propulsion system that can do really interesting things at peak power, like takeoff and like top of climb, to enable the turbine to be much more optimized for cruise, which is where you want it to be optimized. So we see that the future transport could be 25 or 30% more efficient than today's best transports. So that's a big jump, and of course, a large push towards sustainable aviation fuels to get carbon out of the energy source itself. And so while it's 25 to 30% more efficient, it'd be even more or even less carbon emissions as we go forward using sustainable aviation fuels. In the bottom left is high speed, working hard on trying to create or enable the conditions under which high-speed commercial flight can reemerge. This is it's been over 50 years since the Concorde was first developed, and technology's moved a lot since then, and so we can do a lot to make them more efficient, to reduce the noise signature both for landing and takeoff, but also over land. Reduce the sonic boom to acceptable levels, and I'll talk a little bit about that. In the bottom right is advanced air mobility. Of course, a lot of work, and RTCA has been working hard on some of the standards for UAS, but we see the future, getting larger, as many of you know, eVTOLs. Flying in and around urban and suburban areas, regional transports be coming back in greater quantities as as the demand for transportation in local areas continues to increase, but the ability to move people on the ground becomes more challenging. Some of you may know that in 1950, 70% of the world's population was rural, and by 2050, 70% of the world's population is going to be urban, and so urban areas are becoming much more massive and congested, and so urban cities are becoming urban regions, so it's not just moving within one urban area, it's how do you move across these really congested regions. And we think, these advanced air mobility vehicles, EV-tolls and EC-tolls are part of the equation, but doing that safely, having an air traffic management system that supports that and having the noise signatures, all of that work together to make that viable is a big challenge. And of course, then the future airspace is critical, and RTCA has been part of that since the beginning. Obviously, to move all these kinds of vehicles requires us to transform in the way in which we manage the airspace. The work NASA has done, as well as others in UAS traffic management, I think paints the way for the future of the airspace. A federated, service-oriented architecture with a digital backbone. That's the future, and that's going to allow us to both integrate across a number of different use cases and business cases and vehicle types and vehicle performance levels and so forth that otherwise would just be unmanageable because of the differences between these vehicles and the congestion we're going to see, the competition for resources and so forth, and some of these tight airspaces and so forth. So there's a lot to be done there, and I'll talk a little bit about each of these. So first, on sustainability, we have formed a Sustainable Flight National Partnership. This is an ongoing activity. Not every piece is in place yet, but so I won't go into a lot of detail here, but we're looking at every piece, every component of how the current aviation system, airline system operates today. So more efficient vehicles. Again, that's a transonic truss brace wing, one of the concepts we're looking at. You can sort of see the aspect ratio there. But we're also looking to take a large scale, advanced concept to full scale flight here in the not too distant future. We're working on the electrified aircraft propulsion, so bring a megawatt scale powertrain to flight in the not too distant future to prove out that hybrid electric will work. We're working on the fundamental gas turbine, decreasing the size of the core, increasing the thermal efficiency of that core, to reduce the amount of fuel required to produce the thrust. High rate composite manufacturing. So these vehicles are going to want to be produced at high rate. And today that's a challenge for composites. So we're looking at how do we produce composites, very lightweight, very high strength composites at much higher rates than today. Sustainable aviation fuels. There's a big grand challenge that was announced to produce by mid-century, see if we can produce all the fuel that's required, all the sustainable aviation fuel that's required to power 100% of the fleet. That's a huge challenge, but that's what's out on the table today. And obviously airspace operations, then, we want to continue the push towards trajectory optimizations to get that another couple of percent of efficiency. So that airframe, that engine combination that is going to be highly efficient, we want it to operate as efficiently as possible. So we want end-to-end trajectory optimization. Like I said, high-speed commercial flight is another one of those really exciting parts of the system. And one of the things we're focused on right now, the big thing we're focused on from a sustainability perspective, is that overland sonic boom signature. We think today with modern methods, we can soften that boom to a thump, a sonic thump. So something like maybe if your neighbors close their car door and you're inside your house, that's the kind of noise we're talking about, or distant thunder. That's the kind of noise. So not that large sonic boom that you would get with a military aircraft flying overhead or something to that effect. So we think that's doable. But as you know today, speaking of standards, right, there is no standard for an overland level of noise, right? It is a prohibition against supersonic overland flight. So we're going through the entire process of looking at what a reasonable standard might be through ground test, but then we need to bring that for ICAO and for if the FAA to accept that, we need to bring that to flight. So we're actually building that vehicle that you see right there on the screen called X-59, And it's designed to produce what we think is an acceptable level of sonic boom. It's there to emulate actually a transport level vehicle, even though it's a single pilot X-plane. But it will produce that. We're going to go out and fly that over communities and actually survey those communities to see if that is in fact an acceptable level of noise. So it's a very involved mission that we're going after. The centerpiece, of course, is the vehicle, but there's a lot that goes with it. We have to have large noise, large microphone arrays to measure the noise. We have to have the ability to actually survey communities, analyze all that information, and so forth. So there's a lot to it, but right now we're right in the middle of building that vehicle. You see on the left-hand side the current state of building the X-59. It's looking like an aircraft. We're getting very close to having that vehicle on its wheels. And we're going to be starting ground test of that vehicle. We've got the engine in hand, so we're going to complete the vehicle build later this year, and we hope to achieve first flight in 2022. And then we'll be obviously doing envelope expansion for safety, and then we're going to validate that we're getting the noise levels that we had designed into the vehicle. And then once all that is complete, we'll start doing community overflight. So a really exciting mission. Advanced air mobility, many of you are familiar with this. So this is just a cartoon of all the types of operations, of use cases that advanced air mobility is seeking to serve. One thing I wanted to focus on, and so this is just a way to categorize those things into a few buckets: cargo, consumer enterprise, goods and services, passenger transport. The one I just wanted to focus on just briefly is public good. It doesn't get as much attention, but it's something that's really important. Two use cases that we're looking at. One is wildfire management, and that's a bigger story to be told there that I could spend an entire tech talk on. But the kind of technologies we're to be building up around advanced air mobility, from airspace to safety to these vehicles themselves, all of that could be packaged into a way that would support the wildfire management community to do a better job in their aviation operations, safer aviation operations for wildfire management. So that's something we really are motivated. We think that would be a great service to the community to deliver that kind of thing. The other really interesting use case that's out there is for, and you see it there, medical services, right? So today you see these large urban medical systems, world class. You can get the best medical care that is available, that is technically available, scientifically available. But if you live in a rural community, your access to healthcare is not as good. And so in talking to that community, I always thought that, well, you'd want to move people from the rural communities to these large urban centers to get that world-class medical care. But really what they think is, hey, if we can move doctors and equipment to where they need to be, when they need to be there, that might be the best approach. But they can't do it today because the transportation system doesn't support it. But if you had an urban air or an advanced air mobility system that could quickly, efficiently, and safely move doctors and equipment to where they need to be, it could really transform the way healthcare is provided in the United States and other places. And that's just one example of how advanced air mobility isn't just an overlay on our transportation system, but could really transform how businesses work, and how their value chains are supported and so forth, and how public good is delivered. And so we're really excited about this. This is a busy chart, but it's just to say one of the cornerstones of what we're doing is we're developing a national campaign series. Many of you are probably familiar with this, where we want to bring everybody together: industry, the NASA, FAA, standards committees, everybody, to say, okay, here's everything we know. We're going to integrate it together, and we're going to see what we can do. We'll see what kinds of operations we can do. We'll do that in a very disciplined way to gather the data, just like we've done with UAS with our TCA. And we in terms of detect and avoid and command and control communications and so forth, providing that campaign of flight tests that deliver data, that validate standards and so forth. This is the same kind of idea, where over time we'll have a series of campaigns where we bring folks together. We focus on a specific set of topics, whether it's complex operations, high volume vertiports, scalable urban operations, as you see here. Develop that test matrix and go fly and gather that data and deliver it to industry, deliver it to standards organizations, deliver it to FAA and so forth, and help drive this industry forward to where that wants to go. It wants to be a scalable system. It wants to be able to operate. And what we're focused on is kind of what we call UML4, or UN Maturity Level 4, which will be hundreds of operations simultaneously in an urban area. So, pretty mature, not all the way where it wants to be, but a pretty mature state. So that's kind of what our outlook is right now, get that done by about 2030 and really support the emergence of this industry. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about airspace. And so as many of you know, Next Gen has been, the focus for many, many years now. That's really that left-hand corner, that trajectory. Let's get trajectory management. Trajectory operations is the cornerstone of how we do business. NASA is just completing our series of ATD experiments and flight trials to deliver trajectory management tools to the FAA. We've just completed that. But there's more after that, right? FAA's sees a information focused NAS, information-oriented NAS. We call it collaborative, right? Where we see more of these new entrants coming in. We need collaboration on how the airspace is used. Again, that, as I said earlier, that service-oriented architecture, that's the backbone, that digital backbone for collaboration. But then in the long run, we see that we're going to need to integrate AI, machine learning, other things in order to make that system operate at the performance levels that's required to manage the complexity, scalability, dynamic adaptation that's required for all of these use cases to operate at the scale that is envisioned. And of course, at the same time, moving to that digital backbone, that service-oriented architecture allows us to transform how we do safety. So we can move to predictive risk mitigation. We can move to adaptive in-time safety management and mitigation of risks. Because what we're really seeing is, as we add technology, of course, you add risk, you add hazards. We can't afford to have incidents and accidents as a result of the addition of new technology. So we want to make sure we're doing things we move to a prognostic system, right? So let's use all that information. Let's analyze it so we understand the risks and hazards before they become incidents and accidents. Let's mitigate them on the timescales required. And that's really the vision for that. So for each of these timeframes, we've got specific activities. One thing we're doing that helps us start to move from trajectory management to collaborative operations is we are looking at how we would do integrated trajectories. So we've done trajectory management in each of the departure, the arrivals, and en route, and now we want to look at the end-to-end trajectories, and we want to integrate that with a flight deck so that we can really do the best trajectories possible across the entire airspace in real time. And so this is going to be a great project, again, to sort of to add to what we've already been doing through our ATDs in partnership with industry and FAA and others. But at the same time, we're starting to look at, okay, where do we go from here? And so we've got this notion of a sky for all, where we take a look at that long term and we fully adapt to the diversity, complexity, and density of predicted operations, and we develop the tools that are required, that digitally integrated backbone, the machine learning, the artificial intelligence, and so forth that will allow us to manage those kinds of operations. But at the same time, that same backbone is going to support what I just talked about it relative to in-time aviation safety management. So the ability to gather all of that information, safety relevant information, be able to analyze it in real time and sort out where the risks are and mitigate those before they become issues in the system. So we're really excited about this. We see this as a community endeavor with our TCA and with all of the community to really make this happen. And so this is going to be our big thrust for the future, and certainly welcome your participation in that. Finally, I just wanted to say that sometimes things don't get, when we get down to the basic research level or fundamental research level, not everything, it's not as visible to many of our stakeholders. But I just wanted to say that, NASA operates an agile innovation ecosystem. One of the cornerstones of that is university engagement. We have this university leadership initiative where we engage the nation's universities in the hardest problems and let them go tackle one of these problems and go solve it in partnership with others. And so we've got a solicitation on the street right now that's going to about to wrap up. We'll have another one next year. If you don't know anything about this, if you haven't, talked to your favorite university or favorite partner, go out and learn about this. This is a great way to get some acceleration on some new ideas that could really make a difference in the long run. And so we're really excited about this. It's only about 3 or 4 years old now, but it's really going well. So just want to give a shout out to it's the big things are really exciting, but at the core, it's getting these really smart folks and really working these problems. So with that, I know that was a really quick run through of the future of aviation, but let me hand it back to Terry.
Great, Bob. What a fabulous presentation. Thank you so much for being a part of our webinar today and offering to our audience some of your thoughts and perspectives on the future of these aviation systems. So again, thank you.
You're welcome.